go ahead and get things started. Good evening,
Okay.
everyone. Let me take a moment to say a few thank yous. First of all, to Jennifer Crowley, the group's founder. Thank you for everything that you do behind the scenes and making sure that these author chats continue to happen. Thank you to all of the moms who have purchased Bombshell, who've shared their love about it in the group, who've recommended it to their friends, who are here live with us tonight, and to the moms who are going to be joining us later via YouTube and the recording because life is hectic. We still appreciate you circling back to catch up with Sarah. So without further ado, welcome Sarah MacLean.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone. And I echo just all of those thanks. This is amazing.
So for those of you who don't know Sarah, let me read you her bio real quick because she is an impressive lady. She is New York Times, Washington Post, and USA Today bestseller of historical romance novels that have been translated into more than 25 languages. The books make up the MacLeaniverse and are beloved by readers worldwide. In addition to her novels, she is a leading advocate for the romance genre, speaking widely on its place as a feminist text and a cultural bellwether. A columnist for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Bustle. She is the co-host of the weekly romance podcast, Fated Mates. You guys make sure to check that out. It is quite entertaining. And her work in support of romance and those who read it earned her a place on Jezebel.com's She Rose list and led Entertainment Weekly to call her the elegantly fuming, utterly intoxicating queen of historical romance. She's a graduate of Smith College and Harvard University, and she lives in New York City with her husband and her child.
And my 8-year-old, so I understand mom hecticness.
Well, welcome to the Peloton Moms Book Club. We have been working with Kristen to bring some fantastic authors, and she just raved about you, and she sent us Bombshell back when it originally came out, and we read it and loved it. So I'm so glad we were able to get you to come chat with us tonight.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me. I'm always amazed, however many books, 15 books in, it never gets old knowing that people are reading your book and talking about it. Although it's scary too. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, so for the moms who may have not had a chance to actually read Bombshell, why don't you go ahead and give us an introduction and tell us what the book is about?
Sure. So Bombshell is the first in my new series, which is called Hell's Bells. I've always written mostly historical romances. I tried my hand at contemporary in the middle of the pandemic and put out the sort of surprise, I wrote a contemporary story. But historical is where I have lived my whole career. And as a reader too, it's where I started reading romance. And I think where a lot of romance readers start. And Hell's Bells is the general idea was, what if I took the Avengers and I made them, women in the 1840s? What would that look like? Because my favorite genre of basically anything is beautiful people kiss and blow things up, and maybe not necessarily in that order, but that works too. And so my whole life has been, my whole life as a writer feels like it was working toward Bombshell, and the invention of the Hell's Bells, which are a sort of Victorian era girl gang of powerful, smart, talented, brilliant women who have had it with patriarchy and the way the world treats women and other people in the margins, and nobody is stepping up to take care of them in the world, and so they step up to take care of themselves. Yeah, Victorian Charlie's Angels works perfectly. I wish I had come up with that 3 years ago. Jennifer, where were you? That's it. You have to give me your number. We're going to talk about all of my books ahead of time.
Well, so we have Cecily the Bombshell and an explosive expert, a thief, and the mysterious Duchess, who we don't know much about yet. Tell us, Why did you choose these particular skills in women to make up the girl gang?
Well, I started to get really interested when I was conceiving of the series. I started to, I did a lot of research by watching a lot of heist movies. And because I was really interested in, if you're going to put together a gang, who are the pieces of the gangs? And so I watched, the A Team and all the Ocean's movies and the Thomas Crown Affair, and kind of started thinking about like who were, and you probably can see echoes of all of these places and all of these texts in the book, because I really got excited by this idea of, well, everybody needs to have, to take a line from Liam Neeson, a very particular set of skills. and that particular set of skills needs to work both in concert with the group to complete whatever the kind of overarching theme of the book is or plot of the book is, but also be something that makes them more complicated and more nuanced as a character, so that when it comes time for their romance novel, it will not surprise romance readers that this is a 4-book series. Cecily is first, Adelaide comes out in August, Imogen is next year, and then it will finish with Duchess's story. And the idea being, you have each character who has a really particular skill set, and they have that skill set for lots of reasons, and it impacts them in all sorts of ways. And it's part of why their partner falls for them, and also why they're able to find love in this really complicated world that we all live in. So Cecily was sort of the logical beginning because she had come from an earlier series. If you've never read any of my books and you loved Cecily, you can go back to the Scandal and Scoundrel series and read about all of her sisters who you met in Bombshell. And she was the leftover sister. And she had been conceived in that series as kind of a clown figure. Like the last book in that series is very emotional. It's a second chance love story about a couple that really should have been divorced, and because of the law, were not. And they sort of they reconnect and fall back in love. And it's a very emotional, not super serious, but an emotional story. And Cecily was a clown in that story. She was there for comic relief. But she's also, in that whole series, she's sexy and she's funny and she's brazen and she is a risk taker. And I just knew she was not destined for a normal match, like a normal life of marriage and children and, domesticity. And so when I had the idea for the Bells, I was like, this is where Cecily comes back into the MacLean-iverse. And she gets to be the femme fatale of this crew.
Yeah. And she really was. I loved the whole hidden dagger on the thigh and
yeah.
the little pockets that she had. I was like, this girl is going places and she doesn't need a man to protect her because she's got weapons at her disposal, more than one.
Exactly.
And I love that aspect of her. So,
I mean, I love a romance hero who thinks he has to, protect and keep, and step in and defend, and just is blown away by this idea of a heroine who's, she's got it. And if you would just leave her alone, it would be less complicated. You are complicating things. Yeah. Stand there and look pretty, hero.
When I wrote my review of this, and we're going to get to Caleb in a minute, I think like one of the last sentences in my reviews was, if he would just get out of her way, she might end up just saving him too. And
that's exactly it, right? And sure enough.
So, when I heard Hell's Bells, my dad is a really big AC/DC fan. So like, that's immediately where my mind was going to. And that was like the soundtrack to their brawl in the bar. I was like, Hell's Bells, just playing in the background. Was there any particular reason as to why that ended up being the girl gang name?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, AC/DC was around for my whole life. I am not a huge AC/DC fan, but I will say that when we were trying to come up with like things we could send to people to get them excited about the new series, my husband was like, what if we got them all old single record vinyls of Hell's Bells? And I was like, what, where are we? We're just going to troll eBay for 2 years, collect them. No, I mean, it's a very cool, I mean, I knew they had to have a name. And those of you who read Bombshell, Bombshell is actually the origin story of the name. They don't actually have a name until the end of Bombshell. And then when Heartbreaker, which is book 2, starts, the newspapers have all picked up this name that Scotland Yard is using to describe them, the House Bells. And I don't really have a great answer for where it came from. I feel like it just sort of like, one day I was working and I thought, and either I saw somebody say Hell's Bells like in an old movie or something, and it just made sense.
It definitely made sense, and it really rolls off the tongue, and it's just so appropriate. So I mean, kudos, it's a great name.
We had a little bit of trouble at the beginning of when the book was first released, because Hell was pinging filters on the review sites on like Goodreads and Amazon. And we were like, oh no, what have we done? It is the series name. Yeah. But it all worked out. I think we sorted it out, but
nice. Well, I also call it the HBs in my review, just to shorten it, because talk a lot about the HBs.
Yeah.
So I mean, well, so going back to Cecily, who we've also referred to as Sexily. I mean, she is a strong, independent, fierce main character. And I think that that's a popular misconception with romance novels, is that sometimes you can't get those things in a leading lady. And you did great with Cecily. So let's just talk a little bit about her origin story. I know she's got her sisters that we met in the previous series, and we explained why she is the forefront. But I mean, is there anything else you can tell us about Cecily?
When I conceived of the idea of the series, I knew, we haven't announced them all, but I kind of very quickly knew that I wanted to title all of the books with these kind of these words that are weaponized against women, right? That women are, like Bombshell is it's packed with so much meaning, both in its as a weapon, as a literal weapon, and then as the way we talk about women, and the way we use it as a weapon against women. And I think that Cecily, for me, was she has been one of the most fun characters to write from the start. From the very first time I put her on the page, 5 years ago, Cecily's been really special because she for a long time, she was like a Greek chorus, in the sense that she was the one who always said the truth about the way the world is. And she could always see through, she has like an epic bullshit, filter, and she just can tell when the world is mistreating people and why. And but the problem with being a person like that, the problem with being a woman specifically, but a person who takes up space and speaks out like that, is that they become ostracized in many ways by the rest of the world. And so for Cecily, she's very happy. She has her sisters and she has her friends, and she legitimately, I think, has very little care for the way that, power and money and society look at her and judge her. But it still builds a character. It builds the way the world looks at us, builds all of us in some way. And I spent a lot of time thinking about, like, what does it mean to be the most beautiful person in the room? What does it mean when people look at you and they see your body, your face, your exterior, and they never really think about anything else but that. And I think Caleb it was interesting work for me to match them and to sort of give him, I wanted him to be gone for her. I mean, I wanted him to just be unable to even deal with the fact that he was so crazy about her. But he couldn't be crazy about her because she was beautiful. That wasn't like, he had to be just wild about Cecily's whole Cecily-ness, right? Their relationship had to be like big vibes. And it had to be so big that he literally couldn't stay away, to the point where he had to put himself into danger in order to be near her. Because, you know, we all want that in a partner. Or maybe it's just me, but I think a lot of us, you know, we like the idea of like somebody being just unwilling to walk away from you when love is a possibility.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, Caleb was an interesting choice. He was the dreamy hunk from Boston who owns many businesses, including co-owning the bar with one of her sisters. And I believe he was also introduced in the Scandal and Scoundrel series too,
right.
correct? She's
a heroine from a previous book. Her book is called The Day of the Duchess.
So what was it about Caleb that made you decide to bring him back, as opposed to, say, introducing a new man, a suitor for Cecily?
Right. Well, a few things. One, Caleb is in The Day of the Duchess because he's Serafina's business partner, and Cecily and Caleb meet in Day of the Duchess, and they have this like very electric, Cecily and Caleb are fated mates. They meet, and the moment they meet, it's clear that these two they will never not be near each other. And so there was that. There was, of course, a lot of readers were very excited about the two of them and very bummed when they were not the next book, because there's a whole series between their book and Bombshell, that book and Bombshell. And so part of it was that, the sort of sense that like Caleb had been on the page and they seemed destined for each other. But also I wanted it to feel, my whole goal as a romance reader, the books that I love the most are the ones that really swing for the fences, right? Like the emotions are huge, the stories are big, beautiful people are blowing things up, right? And that's metaphorical, but also if it happens for real, I'm for it. And so for me, it really felt like what I wanted was two people who just were going to have these huge emotions. And also I had come off a series. I had the idea for the Bells while I was writing my last series, which was called The Bare Knuckle Bastards. And that was also a series about kind of it had sort of a criminal element to it. The heroes of that series were all smugglers, and lived kind of outside of society. None of them were aristocrats, like they didn't have titles. They were very powerful, but in a different way. And I started to get really interested in that world, that sort of non-titled, non-moneyed world. And I just felt like I wasn't ready to go back to Dukes. I wanted to stay with these characters who have nobility of a different kind.
Yeah, I love the criminal element in the Bare Knuckle Bastard series. That was how I first heard about you. We had talked about the Bare Knuckle Bastard series over in the Peloton Moms book club. They were like, you need to check this series out. So I was like, okay. And then the continuation of the girl gang in this series, I was talking to Jen the other day and I was like, I love the book, love the romance, love Caleb, love Cecily, but like I could have read a book just about the girl gang going around causing trouble and making bad men pay.
Shenanigans.
Yes, giving all of the shenanigans. So I'm so looking forward to more shenanigans in the rest of the series.
Well, that was really what was real. So I wrote the entirety of Bombshell. Yeah, I wrote all of Bombshell in, lockdown in New York City. Because I had a kid who couldn't get, none of us could get vaccinated while I was writing Bombshell, to be honest. So I wrote the whole thing under lockdown. And I really just like, while I was writing it, I was thinking the whole time about how much I missed my friends, how much I missed, my life is very quiet on a day-to-day. I'm a writer. I sit, you are looking at my office right now. It is in my house. And so for me, travel is so important to see my friends. Lunches and drinks and leaving the house becomes a kind of lifeline for me because I don't work with people all day. I don't get that socialization, and I'm a huge extrovert, which is, I don't know why I do the job I do, honestly. But the point is that I was really longing for, dark corners in a bar where you're just gossiping with your friends. And I was really longing for fun. I mean, there were definitely moments where Bombshell and the world that I was building with the Hells Bells was a touchstone to a time and a place that I really was kind of desperate for. And so I think I'm really so happy when I hear from people like, oh, I love the Bells and I just wanted to hang out in that world and I wanted to be with them, because I did too. And of course, while I was writing it, when you write a romance novel, you're supposed to be writing a romance novel, right? But I think what I wrote I think Cecily, again, was the kind of perfect heroine, because what I wrote was a character who had such a beautiful community. And Caleb was so alone at the start of that book. And he really grows to be one of the Bells. By the end, he is part of their crew, and he inherits this like big, beautiful community from her. And I think that's part of what is so beautiful about love in general in life, is that, whether you're talking about romantic love or friendship or love among colleagues, you're talking about community building always. And inheriting family and, big, beautiful families that you get to choose to have. And I think for me, Bombshell was very much that. It was a love letter to communities and to spending time with people and loving other people in all ways.
Oh, I love that. And hearing you say that, I think you nailed it. So great job on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of my favorite scenes in the book, it didn't last too long, but it was just so fun to read, was the dead body near the canal. I was talk about shenanigans. I'm thinking that was going to get them out of the pickle that they were in with KO. I was like, well, that's inventive. And it was interesting to see that play out. And I think I heard you had tossed around the idea of that being the opening for the book. Is that right?
There was the original draft of Bombshell. You did your research. The original draft of Bombshell was that was the cold open, as they call it. That you were, I think the first line was like, the woman was dumping a body, and that was it. And then the whole concept was that it would feel a little like TV, where, that was the open. And then, the dateline would be like 2 weeks earlier. And then you went back and then came toward the body again. So it actually that scene existed in 2 places in the book. And my editor, who has been my editor for 15 books, she got the manuscript and she read it, and she was so kind. And then she was like, I'm not sure the vibe of opening with a dead body is quite, what we're going for. And I was like, but isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? And she was like, well, we're in a pandemic. I was like, okay. So we moved it, but yeah. So the idea was from the start that I wanted there to be shenanigans, like you said. So every book, well, at least the 3 that I sort of for sure know what's going on in, begins with a shenanigan that the Bells are all involved in. And then hopefully over the course of the book, you see them in a few other very sort of, hopefully very cinematic set pieces where you see them, doing Bells stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Adelaide's book is a road trip romance. So it's a really different feel for me as a writer, the second book in the series, because I'm removing her from London and sort of sending her off with her hero to do shenanigans. But I had to take her away from the Bells. So the next book is a very different kind of vibe. And then Imogen, I mean, I need Imogen in a city because she just needs to be a chaos monster.
Yeah, and she is a great one.
Yeah.
Well, as a girl gang fun aside, there was plenty of spice in Bombshell too. Hello, servant's closet love scene. as a romance author, how do you go about deciding how much spice to put into a novel and kind of like where to sprinkle it in? Like, what's the thought process?
It is different for every book because it's different for every character, obviously. And I mean, that's one of those situations where if you have two characters hiding in a closet, I mean, sort of low-hanging fruit for a romance. That's what my podcast co-host Jen calls a danger bang, that closet, because they could be found at any time. So for me, I think I really love writing sex scenes. I think putting sex scenes into romance. I think romance is so great in part because it explores the really delicious pieces of relationships that include, sex is a very like intense experience to have with a partner, and it does amp things up and make things more emotional in so many ways. And at the beginning of a relationship, it's weird and complicated, and like there are so many different ways that you can use sex to change the characters and to change the plot and to move things along, that I always feel like romance is a little bit, we're able to cheat a little bit because other genres don't, as a matter of course, get to show people like really at their barest, in both ways, I guess, but the emotional bearing of characters. So the answer to that is, obviously when you have a character whose name is Sexily, and another character who's literally been struggling to keep his hands off of her for years, when they finally get together, you better be able to deliver, MacLean, So.
Well, deliver you did. So I think that one of my favorite things about the romance genre is the HEA, the happily ever after. And so what is it about the happily ever after that you think resonates with readers?
Romance is one of the few genres where, it's the only genre where that's codified, right? Where there's a covenant between me and my readers that I'm going to take you on this journey. We're going to ride this roller coaster. I'm going to take you like up to the highest of highs and the lowest of lows and rip your heart out, hopefully. But at the end, everything is going to be okay. And I think there is a sense, especially now in the world, that like maybe everything isn't going to be okay. But when I write my books for you, you're always going to be okay. And so you get to really experience the full gamut of human emotion in the best of the books of the genre. It really is that, full, beautiful, vibrant, color wheel of emotion. And at the end, happiness is about, the happily ever after is about partnership. It's about equity. It's about hope. It's about trust. It's about pleasure. It's about all of these things that you can sort of know in your heart that that you will have all of these things. You will have it with these partners, and you will be okay. And no matter what, in my books, right, because I've sort of ripped your heart out and exploded things and done whatever I've done, at the end, no matter what comes at these two, right, they're going to be okay. So you really believe that it is ever after. It is happily ever after. And I think that for every other genre, there is always that question like, oh, how's this gonna go? She might die, right? And for a long time that was true, right? Women who had sex on page, they died by the end of the book. They were punished for it. Or, for a long time in thrillers, before women were writing thrillers, if you put a woman on page, she was often used as leverage to make the hero, to give the hero some sort of traumatic experience or some, quest for vengeance. But romance never does that. Romance takes characters and encourages them to be their very best selves and to live their best lives. Tessa Bailey, who wrote this, one of, I think, the best romances of last year, called It Happened One Summer. She likes to say that she likes to write romance novels because every morning a romance reader can wake up and say, who do I want to be today? And whose life do I want to live like at their very best? And you can find a romance novel about that person and live their happiest life. And I think that's a very cool thing.
Yeah, definitely. I had that one on my TBR, and then her next one, Hook, Line, and Sinker. I'm going to check that one out too.
Yeah,
but
she's
great. I just read a contemporary romance that, like, in the marketing said, this is not your regular romance. And so I'm reading it, and then at the end of it, I'm like, what? The pitch was, not everyone's happily ever after is one size fits all. So, it does not have the traditional happily ever after at the end. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, am I cheated, or do I appreciate the way that this book ended? So I was interested in your thoughts as a romance aficionado. Maybe the girl doesn't end with the boy, but has her own self-fulfilling, self-sufficient. She's happy with where she's at in her life, and she didn't choose the boy.
Yeah, and I think that that's a valid choice in life and in literature. It just doesn't make a romance novel. It makes a women's fiction or commercial fiction, or there are many, many other buckets that book should live in, but it doesn't live in romance and in part because there is this sort of sense with romance readers that we're not stupid. Like I can go off and pick up another book. Like if I pick up a book outside of romance, I know that, the ending could be anything. Who knows what the ending is going to be, but sometimes we want the comfort and the security and it's sort of silly to say, but like we want the happily ever after, and it's not reductive or it shouldn't be diminished. I think one of the challenges with romance for a lot of people is that it is a genre that by and large centers women and other marginalized people in happiness. And that's not always the way that patriarchy wants to operate. So there's always a lot of judgment. There's a lot of judgment around romance in the way that there's judgment around other things that are generally owned and loved by women. You guys are a book club for moms. I'm sure many of you have lots of examples of ways that exists in your life. You think about, things like crochet or knitting or, soap operas or romance or, all sorts of shopping as some sort of therapy, retail therapy, shoes, fashion, all these things that are women that are for women. It's silly because they are all for whoever you want, whoever wants them. But there's a judgment of all of those things. And so I think then romance borrows this additional judgment, which is about love and how the world kind of commodifies love and reduces love to a thing that, businesses use to sell us Tic Tacs and car insurance and, hamburgers. And the truth is that love is really being around us all the time and being something that everyone can in some way relate to, whether it's romantic love or friendship or family. Doesn't make something small. It makes something enormous. It makes something, you just expansive and beautiful. And so I think when we come for the HEA as a society, what we're doing is we're really coming for something that is like one of the most beautiful things that we have, and just let us have our joy. We don't get joy in that many places. So.
I hear you. One of Melly C, who only reads romances primarily, she's a big romance person in our group. She's like, romance has to have the HEA, 100%. We want the HEA. Like, she's very passionate about
Melly,
the HEA.
I agree. Come sit by me.
And then Diane had asked, what prompted you to write historical romance specifically, as opposed to contemporary romance?
Yeah. I think part of it, certainly at the beginning, it was because I started reading romance when I was 10 years old, and I started with historical romance, and I just have always loved historical romance. So there's that. That's sort of the simple answer. The slightly more complex answer as I move forward in my career, because now I've been doing this for 12 years. So it, you know, it's not, that can't be the answer anymore. Like I could have changed genres. I really love historicals because the worlds are structured in such a way that I can really play with modern ideas and modern concepts by setting them in relief against this kind of very old world. And what I mean by that is, you know, if I can write a book about, you know, celebrity sex tapes in Victorian England, right? And I have done that. But it was a nude painting that, you know, she was in love and she let somebody paint a nude portrait of her. And then it was, you know, it was never supposed to be seen. And he sent it to, you know, a massive exhibition. And I wrote that book. And what I wanted to talk about was slut shaming when I wrote that book, right? But it's difficult to do that without sort of feeling a little bit like you're knocking people over the head with the message, so to speak, in contemporaries. But in historicals, I could write a heroine who was truly devastated, both emotional, both like personally and also just in the world, just shunned for, you know, giving a piece of herself to another person privately. And that book became about privacy, and it became about who we are and how we trust and the way the world looks at us and the way the world perceives us. And so for me to do that against a historical setting really gives me an opportunity to blow the world wide open, to take bigger swings. I think you can do things in historical, like blow up a jail, for example, in a way that like readers are along for the ride instead of, you know, or like dump a dead body in a way where readers are along for the ride. You know, where in contemporaries, if I started a book with somebody dumping a dead body, like there are about 72 security cameras probably right around there, and also a large police force that would probably find them fairly quickly. So the Vaseline on the lens a little bit with historical romance gives me a lot more opportunity to have fun. But contemporary, I wrote that fun contemporary story last summer, and I had a really great time doing it. It was a challenge because of cell phones, but you know, you can't just nobody can send a letter that doesn't get there for 30 years in 2022. So
true. Well, when writing historical romances specifically, they're fiction, and you know, you can write whatever you like, but then there's the expectation that they are going to be historically accurate. How do you find the balance between fun and embellishment and accuracy?
I've never had an idea in 15 books, I've never had an idea that I couldn't find evidence of in history. I think the thing that often people don't realize about history is that there is nothing new aside from technology, right? Like I obviously can't give my characters a cell phone or like a Maserati, but like I can give them a really fast carriage and have them be, you know, carriage racers, or, you know, get somewhere fast. Fast-ish. It's not a Maserati, but but aside from technology, I mean, women and marginalized people have lived happily since the dawn of time. There have been, certainly laws have to exist. You know, there are certain things that are illegal in the Victorian era that are not illegal now. And if I want a character to do one of those things, I have to sort of acknowledge that there are rules, that there were problems, that there were laws. But truthfully, I have never had, I decided I wanted to write smugglers, and I wanted to write a family of smugglers, and I wanted them to smuggle goods in the hulls of ships. And you know, there's a lot of evidence that, you know, that people were doing that people were smuggling things like throughout Europe in the hulls of ships, of ice ships, you know, inside of whiskey barrels, you know, things like that. Maybe I'm just not creative enough, but you know, there's the Bells are based on a legitimate girl gang. It was called the 40 Elephants. And it lasted from about the 1820s to the 1960s. And it was the largest ring of shoplifters ever in the history of the United Kingdom. And it was entirely peopled by women. It had queens. The heads were called the queens of the 40 Elephants. The final queen was buried in 1960 after her death in a $3,000 dress stolen from Harrods. And like, these are real people. This gang. If I put some of the things that this gang did in books, I would get letters saying like, you're crazy. This could not possibly have happened. You know, one of them, her name was Alice Diamond. She was imprisoned for falsifying work papers to work in a munitions factory so that she could steal essentially like explosives and use them for crime. So, you know, they invented specialty garments so that they could move quickly through department stores, and like under their skirts, they had closed cages underneath their skirts. So they could literally just like, and huge pockets in the fabric. So, you know, they could grab a handbag or a muff or fur or a gentleman's like cloak and shove it into their skirts, and it would just like fall to the bottom of the cage, and then they would just walk out with all of this stuff. I mean, they were genius criminals, and they existed. They were real.
Yeah. Did you know about that before you started the book? I mean, does kind of like the idea come to you first and then you're like, well, let me go see if this actually happened? Or do you just know all of these random historical facts and you're like, that could make a good book? You know, like what comes first, the horse or the carriage?
I did know about the 40 Elephants ahead of time. I think probably they were a big inspiration for the Bells. I had read, you know, thank God for the internet. There's this great Twitter account by a woman called Kate Lister, and the account is called The Whores of Yore, and the book is called she has a book called The Curious History of Sex, and they're both just remarkable texts in the sense that, you know, she's a researcher, she's a historian. And she, I think, tweeted a, you know, pretty extensive thread about the 40 Elephants existing. And I thought, well, I mean, that's just too good. I'm going to take that. And so I took, you know, it's a little bit of 40 Elephants, a little bit of Charlie's Angels, a little bit of, you know, Ocean's 11, a little bit of Thomas Crown Affair, Peaky Blinders, and you just sort of throw them all in the, you know, blender, and boom, Bombshell happens.
Yeah, definitely. Well, when I see historical romance writers brought up in the Peloton Moms book club the most, it's, you know, Julia Quinn for Bridgerton, Evie Dunmore with The League of Extraordinary Women, and you. And so I've read some Bridgerton, I've read all of Evie's books, and now I'm on this series with Hell's Bells. And so I'm thinking about the covers of these books, you know, the Bridgerton covers, they just got kind of revamped, a little bit more contemporary covers. And then Evie's are really colorful and graphic design, but Sarah's is letting you know what's coming. It is very
well, flip it around.
Oh yeah, exactly. Flip it around. We know what's coming. So just tell us about your, you know, your decision making and thought process behind your book covers.
I love a beautiful photograph. I really do. The back cover of that is what's called a clinch. And for those of you who've been reading, people who've been reading romance for a long time, and people who've just been, you know, in the world with eyeballs have seen clinches before. You know, Fabio made them very famous back in the day. And I started reading romance, and clinches were part of those books. And as I started doing, you know, research and when I went to college, I was really interested in the clinch, in the romance novel as a concept and as a product. And what I started to really come to love about the clinch and like these kind of very kittenish covers, these covers where you knew exactly what was in them. I really started to realize that like those covers, besides telegraphing to readers, like this is what's inside this book, like that's a historical romance, there's sex inside it, it's definitely set in the 1800s, there are all sorts of things that code to the reader very quickly. And as an aside, I have myself been in a Walmart on release day, because oftentimes that last Tuesday of the month is the day that they release most of the romances. And I've seen women go down with their cart in Walmart and just like tip every dress cover, into their cart, because they just know, they don't care it could be me, it could be you, it could be any, they don't care about me at all. They're just like, beautiful cover, I want that, right? I want that historical, I need that historical. So there's that, but also they telegraph to other readers. They're like, keep out. If this isn't what you want, you keep out. This isn't for you. And I think in the 70s and 80s, the clinch was really about as much for telling women, like, this book is for you, as it was for telling men, this book is not for you. And what I mean by that is the books are really subversive. Like you said, they're about, strong women making like big decisions and like taking power and taking up space and living out loud. And those kinds of choices in 1972, 1982, 2022 are still big choices for women and for people in the margins. And a safe space to talk about, to see characters doing that and to think about your own life in that way and sort of honor your own like kink if you're into erotic romance or, whatever it may be. A quiet place to have that conversation by yourself away from the other gaze is a really important thing. And those covers tell us that this is ours, this is for us. Mm-hmm. So I love them and I would not give them up. Maybe someday I will have to give them up, but I'm not interested in giving them up now.
Well, I'm here for it. I did not know that was what it was called on the back of Clinch, but that's a very apropos description. I'm going to scroll back up. Jim Crowley had asked, Sarah, how do you think Colleen Hoover has impacted the romance genre? Do you feel like she's a romance writer? This is just...
I think Colleen's amazing. I'm so grateful for her. I feel like so many more people have come to romance because of Colleen and because of TikTok. And I say we have a very, very large pool and you are all very welcome in it. Also, I don't know Colleen at all, but we have several mutual friends. So I think, and I'm told she's like a delightful human. And so it's always really nice when like a really delightful person has delightful things happening to them. But I just can't, for me, I think what Colleen is doing is just bringing, and Colleen and Emily Henry and Christina Lauren, a lot of these writers who have just like electrified TikTok, are bringing new readers to the genre and, showing people that the happily ever after shouldn't be mocked. It's not, it's something really gorgeous and something really important and something that we all deserve to have in our lives. Life is too short for depressing books. So
I hear you on that.
But Colleen knows how to put you through the ringer too. Really does know how to just stomp on you. But then at the end, like, it's okay. And I think that's great.
Well, I'm going to start to wrap this up. Bridgerton is on Netflix. I am thinking that the Bombshells would be right at home on Hulu because that they've got The Great.
Yeah, and Harlots.
Yes, and Harlots. Mm-hmm.
If you have friends at HBO Max or Apple or Hulu, feel free to send them my book.
Yes.
You've already chosen the soundtrack of the first bar brawl. I think it's perfect.
Yes. Well, Sarah, it has been so delightful talking to you. And one of the things that we love to end our author chats with is just to see, like, what are you reading right now and loving, or what would you recommend to the group? Put something on our radar.
Well, I talked about Tessa Bailey already. I am what am I reading that I can talk about? This is hard because I have read a couple of really terrific books that are not out yet, but I'm going to put one on your list. This is historical. I think Adriana Herrera is like one of the greatest voices of like this new, sort of like new world of romance. And she has written a book called A Caribbean Heiress in Paris. And it is set in the 1890s at the World's Fair, the Parisian World's Fair. And the heroine is a Dominican rum heiress who has like invented this like new kind of rum. And she's come to the World's Fair to present her rum. And she just like throws this earl with like a whiskey distillery into just chaos. And it is perfect. It's sexy. It's fun. It's set in Paris. Like the Eiffel Tower is up. It's just brand new, sparkling new. And it's terrific. It comes out in May. Right. That one for sure. Yeah. And actually I just finished Tracy Livesey's American Royalty, which is a contemporary. And if you like a royal story in real life or not, the heroine is an American rapper and the hero is a prince.
Oh, fun.
And it's really like, again, very sexy, very fun. It gives off like Meghan Markle, Harry vibes a little bit. And it's great. It's terrific. And that's by Tracy Livesey.
Fantastic. We will get these recommendations up on our Instagram and
Great.
On our Facebook group. And so once again, where can we find you out on socials? And your podcast is Fated Mates.
My podcast is Fated Mates. So if you like romance or you think maybe you like romance and you like podcasts, hopefully you'll like us. But we also recently did an episode where we talked about Roy Kent from Ted Lasso, and about we have 2 Roy Kent episodes where we talk about Roy Kent as like a perfect romance hero. So even if you're not sure if you like romance, but you do like Ted Lasso, we've got something for everyone. That's called Fated Mates. You can find it anywhere that you listen to podcasts, and new episodes drop every Wednesday. You can also find me at sarahmaclean.net. All my books are there. Everything about me is there. You can find more about me. And I'm on Twitter at Sarah MacLean and on Instagram at Sarah MacLean. And those are the best places to find me.
All right. Well, fantastic. We cannot wait. Well, yes, Kristen was reminding us Heartbreaker comes out this summer, and it's about Adelaide, and it's the road trip romance. So I have to believe there's going to be some forced proximity up in a carriage.
I mean, I can't confirm or deny how many beds are in any hotel room, how many hotel rooms are free. I can't confirm or deny, but I can say there's a shocking lack of beds in England in this year.
And when is that coming out?
August 23rd.
August 23rd. Okay, well, fantastic. Add that to your Goodreads list, and pre-order is available now or coming soon?
Yes. Yep. You can get it now anytime. And if you haven't read 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake, which is my first romance novel, which is 12 years old this year, a new edition, a beautiful trade edition, trade paperback edition is coming out in March. So that will be on shelves near you, and it's blue and gorgeous. So.
Ooh, all right. Fantastic. Well, we will check it out. Sarah, thank you again so much for coming and chatting with the Peloton Moms Book Club. We wish you much continued success, and fingers crossed that we get to watch The Hell's Bells on Hulu or HBO Max or Apple TV or all of these things. So
yes, manifest it for 2022. Yes. Thank you so much. It was really fun to chat, and thank you all so much for reading. And I hope you all get happily ever afters for yourself.
Thank you so much. You have a good night.
Bye.